This is episode 720 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Rio Rancho Mayor Greg Hall, who is also the only current Republican candidate for governor in 2026. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Greg.
Well, thank you, Paul, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to come sit and chat and talk about all the things that are happening in Rio Rancho and also all the things that we're hoping are going to happen in the state of New Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about all of those things in the span of this conversation. But as we get started, I always try to get a little bit of an understanding for our listeners about the person I'm talking to, where they came from, physically, of course,
Yeah.
is great, but mentally and kind of professionally, what led you to be mayor of Rio Rancho and what leads you to want to be governor of the state of New Mexico?
Absolutely. Well, just going back a little bit in time, I moved to New Mexico back in 1986 from Pagosa Springs, Colorado, and really decided to make New Mexico my home. And this is where we've raised our family and landed in Santa Fe in 1986, then eventually down into Albuquerque. And somewhere around 1995, 96, somewhere in that range, we landed in Rio Rancho. And at that particular time, I had just kind of wrapped up a business that I had owned at that time, a manufactured housing sales company. We basically sold mobile homes, and we sold them where they sat. So we were a real kind of a quasi real estate agent for mobile homes, except mobile homes aren't real estate. But we brokered those homes for people, and then in 2000, I opened up a new company called Certified Packing and Crating, and we dealt with packing and crating large scale equipment, large artwork, antiques, and we shipped that stuff all over the world right out of Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. Had a pretty substantial business. We did a lot of work up in Santa Fe and Los Alamos, San Diego National Labs, Intel Corporation. Did a lot of different things for those companies when it came to packing, shipping, and crating. And in 2012, I decided to take a step back from that and just kind of started consulting with some small businesses, a few of them up in Rio Rancho. And Paul had just realized that, getting a business license in Rio Rancho at the time was a little bit difficult. And I felt like, as a former business owner, former two-time business owner, as the process should have been easier to get a home occupation business license or just to get a business license in the city. And so as it goes, Paul, when you complain about the government and you're in a group of people, they say, well, why don't you do something about it, right? And so ultimately, people have started asking me, have you ever thought about running for office? And it really wasn't on the bucket list, had no previous political background whatsoever, and started literally looking at how to run for office and specifically how to run for the mayor's office. And so in 2013, we mounted our campaign to run for the mayor of Rio Rancho. And in 2014, in a runoff election, I won. I won the runoff election with 65% of the vote, and the rest is history. 4 years later, I ran for re-election, and then, of course, in 2022, ran for re-election again. So I'm in my third term as Rio Rancho's mayor, and we've just been very, very, very focused on what we can do to make Rio Rancho the best possible community that we can make it. And Paul, one of the first things we embarked upon when I took office in 2014 was trying to streamline some of the processes. And I'm very proud of the fact that within 2 years of my being in office there, we were recognized nationally as a best place to open a small business. And because we had, from my business experience, I just felt like this is the way things should happen. The process should be easy. It should be transparent because, as you know, Paul, in any community, any county, any state, the true lifeblood of those entities are the businesses that are in those municipalities or counties or the state. And so helping businesses get started really helps the economy move along. People start moving into those areas, and then you not only have the businesses there that are creating the job bases, but you have the residents now that are buying homes. And of course, those businesses are employing those residents, and those residents are then spending their money throughout the community, which really broadens the tax base and helps you really run the community. And we needed to build that tax base in Rio Rancho because, as you're very well aware, Rio Rancho was really a suburb of Albuquerque, if you will, and just a community of homes, right? And so we had to really kind of figure out how we were going to build the business environment. In 2014, when I took office, Intel really looked like they had one foot out the door, and we needed to work with them to see what we needed to do to help get them to reinvest in the Rio Rancho facility. So there's been a lot of things that we've been focusing on, but after we got started, we embarked on developing a strategic plan. And part of that strategic plan, Paul, was we wanted to be recognized as the best city in the Southwest to live in. And that meant we had to have great public safety. That meant we were going to have to start investing in infrastructure. That meant that we were going to have to start really recruiting businesses and creating opportunity in Rio Rancho. And so over the past 11 years, we've seen Rio Rancho recognized nationally as a best place to live. Just recently, we were recognized as the number 2 most affordable community with a high median income in the Southwest, the second most affordable city to live in. And we've got people that have been moving there just left and right. One of the things I point out, and I know you know this because you really follow data, you look at numbers. I listen to your show constantly and how you track the data, how you track the numbers. And in the last census, I think you and I both know that the numbers for growth in the state were pretty abysmal. I think less than 3% total overall statewide. But over the last 11 years, we've seen Rio Rancho go from a population of about 89,000 when I took office to we're just a little. I think we're between 115 and 120,000, depending on what numbers you look at. Last one I saw, we were at about 118,000, which officially puts Rio Rancho in the number 2 slot for the second largest city in the state. We kind of go back and forth with Las Cruces on that because they're seeing some good growth down there in Las Cruces as well, but up here, we've been focused on really being business friendly, developer friendly, so that Rio Rancho is meeting the housing need in the area. Well, at least part of it. We represent about over the last 4 years, we represent on average, 40% of the home starts that are happening in the Albuquerque, Santa Fe area. And so Rio Rancho is really meeting that need. And you see our community where a lot of people live and they commute from Rio Rancho to Santa Fe. And of course, a lot of people live in Rio Rancho and they commute out to Albuquerque, but we're constantly trying to recruit businesses, bring in new services. As you probably remember, one of the biggest issues Rio Rancho faced was the fact that we just didn't have a lot of retail up there. We didn't have a lot of businesses up there. And so everybody would leave the city to go get whatever they needed. So we had a huge tax leakage problem, and it was really difficult for us to move the city, move the community forward, pay for the services that the citizens were looking for. But that all was part and parcel to the fact that we're still a very young community. We're still only 44 years old. We were incorporated in 1981. So when I took office, we were only about 30 years old at that time, 30, 31, 32 years old. And so I like to refer to us as being as in city ages as a tweenager, right? You're coming out of that toddler, young growth phase and moving into that more established city phase. And so we're really kind of right now in between, that spot where you're seeing that good the big business growth. And really seeing that budget start to grow based on business growth, not on tax growth or anything like that as far as tax increases, but actually bringing businesses into the community and sharing having those businesses partner with us in the tax base to help us achieve the things that we do. So we've been very proud that over the last 11 years, the median household income has gone from just under $55,000 a year to a little over 85 now. So we've seen some pretty substantial growth throughout the community of Rio Rancho from the business standpoint, people moving there, people wanting to be there, quality of life, public safety, infrastructure development. And of course, we have a really great school district up there too in Rio Rancho Public Schools. Now, as you know, the school districts are autonomous from the city. I always have to give kudos to the leadership at the school district because they've really got a vision for quality as well. So we got a lot going on there, Paul, and I'm going to pause. I said a lot there.
Yeah, you did.
I said a lot there. I'm sure you want to jump in and throw in a few questions.
Well, for starters, first and foremost, it's a misconception to call Rio Rancho conservative. It's very much a kind of 50-50 area of our state. It just, is more conservative, if you will, than Albuquerque, its biggest neighbor. But what I really want to address with you before we move on to bigger, more gubernatorial aspects of this conversation is, you look at the management of the city of Albuquerque and how you and, to an extent, your predecessors have done things in Rio Rancho. Could you point to a couple of major differences or philosophical things that you think make Rio Rancho more successful? Which I think it's hard to argue that anything but that Rio Rancho is more successful, obviously faster growing, but generally better managed part of our state.
Well, I think when you look at every individual's management style, my management style comes from my business background. I'm results driven. I like to see actual, markable results in how we're doing stuff. So, take for example crime. One of the things that we're very vested in is making sure that we're providing our first responders, our police officers, with the equipment that they need. And I'm very proud of the fact that over the last 10 years, we've been able to more than double our budget into the police department. Now, mind you, our budget is not near in Rio Rancho on the police department what the Albuquerque Police Department budget is. It's a much smaller number. But that being said, we've made that a high priority in making sure that our police department has the tools and the resources they need. But at the same point in time, also making sure that, like, our chief knows that our chief can go out and do the job that we've asked him to do, and that's keep the community safe. And whether that's, you probably know, Paul, if you roll up into Rio Rancho and you're speeding or you're tailgating or you're, weaving, you're probably going to get pulled over. You're probably going to, the police officer's going to check you out, see what's going on. So we have a very strong ground game when it comes to not only community policing, but on the ground patrolling, looking for the things that could potentially be problematic. Now, is Rio Rancho crime-free? No. As with any community, we have to deal with crime head-on. We have to look at it. We have to see where those numbers are. We have to see where are we seeing upticks? Where are we seeing progress and improvement? And I think the one big thing is that when you've seen the type of growth that Rio Rancho's seen in the last 11 years, you haven't seen commensurate increases in the number of crimes. And when we do see an increase in a specific number, we're very aggressive about looking at that number and saying, okay, well, what do we have to do to get that number under control? For example, we saw over the last couple of years, we've seen a decrease in certain crimes. Number one, theft from vehicles. We saw a little bit of an uptick on that a couple of years ago. So we invested in these parking lot cameras so we could monitor our parking lots and try to be more proactive about that. One of the other areas, whether it's auto thefts or just general crimes that you might see, shoplifting, retail, those retail crimes, such like that. We're constantly monitoring those things, and when we see an uptick or a fluctuation in those, we want to know why that's causing that and what are the resources we need to deploy to try to get away from that. And then the other thing, when you talk about growth and management, infrastructure has been a huge thing for me, Paul. It has just been really the number one thing. When I took office, there were no roads being fixed in Rio Rancho. As a matter of fact, in 2011, 2012, the voters had actually voted down the road bond, and so it basically defunded any type of road and infrastructure repair in the city, and we were completely dependent on whether or not the legislature would give us capital outlay to fix a road. And of course, with capital outlay, you can't go fix potholes. So you've got to try to budget in some of these things to try to keep the city moving again. But in 2016, we worked with the citizens, and through huge community support, we were able to get the road bond started again. And we've been laser focused on replacing infrastructure. As you probably hear when you hear chatter online, water lines and roads are probably the two biggest issues in Rio Rancho. And unfortunately, early on, we had a lot of infrastructure that was installed that didn't last nearly as long as what it should have lasted. So we've had to embark on replacing a lot of infrastructure. And when it comes to water lines, I'm very proud of the fact that with the way that we have managed the utility and managed our resources, every water line that's been replaced in the city over the last 10 years has been paid for cash with no corresponding debt. A lot of the other things that we've done throughout the community, we've managed to do it through the cash on hand resources or partnering with our state and federal partners to help us achieve the goals that we need and really keep debt overall at a minimum. So while our road bond over the last 10 years has generated $50 million, I know we've done over $140 million of road replacement, road repairs. And that means about 90,000 of that has been paid for through other means where we didn't acquire the debt. So when you get back to your question is, what are your different management styles? Really, I can only speak to my particular management
differences
style.
from you and Albuquerque, or
Right.
Rio Rancho and Albuquerque.
Right, exactly. And really, all I can do is speak to my own management style, and that is just results driven. Paul, listening to what the citizens want. We embarked immediately on citizen surveys when I took office, finding out exactly what was the most important things for us to do within our community. And roads, and public safety. Those were all the critical things that we heard people talking about. And as we embarked down those things, we monitored those things. For example, in our most recent survey, 93% of the citizens of Rio Rancho feel safe in the community during the day, and that's a pretty high number. And we're very proud of that. And it's because we continue to manage from a results and data-driven decision-making that allows us to invest the citizens' tax dollars in places that we know that they're going to be most effective and get us the most positive results. And our citizens recognize that. So it's really results-driven. I go back to my business ownership. I ran my packing and shipping company. I ran it debt-free. And it was pay as you go, get a job, get a contract, buy the materials, pay the employees, and not go out and leverage yourself to death and leverage the company. And I use those same philosophies of getting things done. And I've got a great staff that really helps me achieve those goals. And I've got a great city council that helps us achieve those goals as well. They look at the priorities. We do priority-based budgeting. We do priority-based projects that are data-driven and try to step back from a lot of the emotion. Because in any given time, Paul, you're going to get dozens of phone calls throughout the months. Come fix my road, come fix my road, come fix my road. And you can't just jump from one place to the other. You have to have a systematic process as you do these things. And that's not always easy to do with a city, because you've got, especially Rio Rancho, being spread out over 103 square miles. It's spread out very rapidly, very quickly. So it gives us a lot of infrastructure to maintain, a lot of things to keep our eye on. And so it comes down to what are those priorities? What are the citizens looking for? And how can we meet their needs?
Well, that's a nice way to put it. As a resident of Albuquerque, I'm going to say the laws are not enforced adequately.
Right.
People do not go to jail when they commit crimes. Um, and, I've talked about this extensively. I am not a crime expert, but I look at the crime situation and I blame the mayor, the police chief, the DOJ. I blame the judges. I realize in your city and in others across the state, one person doesn't have control over those
Right.
things. But, crime in Rio Rancho is a fraction of what it is in the city of Albuquerque. And that's got to be related to, in part, decisions that you make and approaches that you and your police chief and your whole police force make on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. It's called enforcing the law. We have laws for a reason. And those laws are really super important to the people that live in that community. They want us to see us enforcing the laws. And we're not the only community that wants to see their local government or their state government or their county governments enforcing the laws. I believe that the greater portion of individuals that live in New Mexico want to see those laws enforced. And up in Rio Rancho, they know that we have, once again, as I said, when you come into Rio Rancho and if you're speeding, we're going to enforce the law there. If you get pulled over by a police officer because you're speeding, you're probably going to get a speeding ticket. Or you might get a warning. Who knows? That's really the police officer assesses the situation, but you're going to get a speeding ticket most likely. If you're doing something else reckless, or if you're shoplifting and you get arrested for that, you're going to go to court, and you're going to go before the judge, and the judge is probably going to sentence you for that shoplifting. And so, yeah, Paul, it really comes down to we have laws for a reason, and they need to be enforced. And we have really given our police department that directive that we want to enforce the laws because we put those laws on the books for a reason.
All right. Well, let's focus more exclusively on issues relating to your run for the top office in the state of New Mexico, governor. And specifically, obviously, this is an economics organization. We talk a lot about economic policies and issues. We've talked personally over lunch and
Yep.
other meals about the gross receipts tax and the many problems that it causes businesses. Now, there are 101 problems with New Mexico public policy, but you've got to run and you've got to start with something.
Sure.
How much of an issue is the gross receipts tax? Something that you're going to talk about, or what issues
Yes.
do you want to focus your campaign on?
So, gross receipts tax is a very, very big issue because it is a pyramiding tax. It's very business unfriendly, but at the same time, and you and I have talked about this, is when we start going toward that particular tax, we have to be cognizant of the fact that gross receipts tax right now is the lifeblood of just about every municipality. So as we go forward and we talk about reforming that, changing that, taking that away, the one thing that I think the communities are really going to be very interested in is, okay, when we replace that or we get rid of that, what do we replace it with to make sure that we're not damaging the communities that are trying to provide services to their citizens? Like, number one, for example, Rio Rancho, I believe about 56% of our budget right now is gross receipts tax. That's where that revenue comes from. And about 56% of my budget goes into public safety. And you're going to find that in a lot of communities around the state. So yes, that's going to be an issue. But I think as we look at that, Paul, you've heard these, and the economics all play into some of these other larger issues. Crime and public safety, that's going to be a huge one for us because I have been very pro public safety. pro law enforcement, pro first responders, and we've made that a priority in Rio Rancho. And I think when you make that a priority, you're going to see business development and growth come in. Education is going to be a huge one. Those are going to
Well,
be,
we'll talk about
yeah,
that in a minute.
yeah.
So
Well, I just was hitting the top level
yeah, no, I
stuff.
get
Yeah,
it. Okay, public safety, and
sure,
the current governor's kind of dipped her toe into that realm a little bit, and we've already talked fairly extensively about that, so I don't want to
sure.
go back too far down that path. But um, look, the gross receipts tax is
Yeah,
one of many taxes. I understand the challenge with local communities, and that's one of the
yep,
things that scotched that back in 2023. There are ways, for example, the food tax issue under Bill Richardson,
yep,
they used a hold harmless mechanism. It was very clumsy and inarticulate, and it shifted between Richardson and Susana Martinez.
yes,
But there's other ways to skin the proverbial cat of
absolutely.
improving the economy. So, gross receipts tax may or may not be your priority. What are your priorities, or what is your priority when it comes to New Mexico's economy?
Absolutely. When it comes to the economy, business development, business recruitment, and when it comes to manufacturing jobs and other things like that, the gross receipts tax is going to have to be fundamentally either taken to a pure sales tax like other states have, because of the pyramiding nature of gross receipts tax. It becomes a compounded burden on businesses. And I had to deal with gross receipts tax when I ran my business. In the Swiss cheese nature of it, I remember when I was running my particular company, I was specifically audited by the state on gross receipts tax, and it wasn't based on what I had paid in gross receipts tax. It was based on the NTTC system, which is the non-taxable transaction system, which has really, through those exemptions, created a very Swiss cheese mechanism through there. And I agree with you 100%. As a municipality, we had to deal with the hold harmless issue from taking the sales tax off of food. And so how we restructure that, we're working on those ideas, we're working on those policies. I'm working with leaders in other states. I'm working with tax policy individuals that have ideas around this, and we will be making that a high priority. Do I have all the answers for that right now? No, that's going to take a lot of really great minds to come together, figure out some good legislation, get that legislation through the legislature, and bring New Mexico into a competitive place with the states that are around us on those tax issues. So, but we want to do it thoughtfully and carefully, because as you just mentioned, the hold harmless process that started under Richardson and then moved through Susana Martinez was very clumsy, and it created a lot of confusion, and it created a lot of funding issues. When hold harmless was taken off, there was an agreement from the state. If for those individuals that don't know what we're talking about here, when gross receipts tax was taken off of groceries, the state agreed that, okay, we're going to take this off of groceries, but we're going to hold the cities and counties harmless from the revenues that came from that, because that was going to be a pretty big hit. If you can think about, everybody buys groceries, right? It's, that's a big item. So it wasn't a small amount of money by any stretch of the imagination. And so the agreement is whatever your revenues would have been, we're going to make those up on an annual basis. And so this from the state. Well, the state was in quite the money crunch during the Martinez administration, and so they came up with a slow stair step method of pulling the cities off of the hold harmless payments, so that the state could pull those back in, use those for the needs that the state had. But in exchange for that, Paul, they said that the cities and the counties could raise each of their GRT rates by 0.3%. You saw a bunch of communities sweep right in and pass all 3/8 of those all at one time, and that was an unintended consequence, because the legislation didn't say.
That was including Albuquerque.
Yeah, that was including Albuquerque, right?
Yeah, which really didn't need it for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the primary issue, and I want to move on to something else.
Absolutely.
But it's a little bit arcane. Let's just say that yes, there are challenges, there are issues.
Yes,
but you want to address the gross receipts tax.
Absolutely.
And, that's great. We'll move on from that. How about income tax reduction, uh, elimination, talk about the personal income tax or corporate income tax. What other, this state is awash in money. We have $61 billion sitting in various funds. I realize that some of that is, dedicated to certain constitutional concerns, but this
Correct.
state has been, flooded with oil and gas money, and we really haven't done anything to improve our state. So, just throwing it out there.
No, absolutely.
Taxes on the income.
So I think all taxes are on the table as how we're going to evaluate each one of those. I really like some of the tax policy that we've looked at in the past, where uh, we remove tax from social security. Give I've seen some of the tax breaks that have come through for veterans in the recent legislature. Those are great things. I think we need to continue to look at those, give relief to the taxpayers, because as you said, we're flush with cash. We've got one of the richest, if not the richest, permanent fund in the country. And for me, I think that if there was a rainy day, I think we've got a rainy day going on right now because we could be using that money to improve infrastructure. Like you said, what have we seen for that money? Just recently, we saw the legislature uh, raise the royalties on the oil and gas industry by another 5%, taking it from 0.20 to 0.25 on the royalties. And at this point in time, with the state having as much money as it has right now, I had to scratch my head on that one and say, why are we raising this royalty amount and taking more money from the oil and gas industry when in reality, what we need to be doing is investing back in the oil and gas industry, especially into infrastructure down in the southeast area of the state. That's generating all this revenue for the state of New Mexico, investing back in the infrastructure, investing back in the roads, taking that money and putting it in there. And I understand that the royalties from that are primarily directed at education. But once again, where are we going to invest that money in the education? We've taken more money now. We're going in forward into the future. Where are we going to invest that? So that money's there now. How do we look at each of these taxes, whether it's corporate income tax, whether it's personal income tax, whether it's tax breaks for individuals, senior citizens, as we said, Social Security, veterans, all of these different taxes, really evaluate the dollars that those are bringing in, where we're spending those dollars, making sure that we're spending those dollars as efficiently as we possibly can, and reducing those taxes in a meaningful way that gives people relief. Because once again, if you put more money in people's pockets, you're going to see them out spending, and it's going to generate revenues on other sides. So taking a total overall approach to the tax package, and like I said, one of the things that I've listened to in your particular show is all the points that you bring up on these various different taxes, and they are extremely valid. And these are also, at this point, our team is exploring each one of these very high level, but they are a high target priority.
All right. Well, thank you for that. You mentioned education, funding, and education at the district level, especially in Rio Rancho. Uh, Broadly speaking, have you formulated a approach to improving New Mexico's worst in the nation education system? Obviously, Rio Rancho is a shining light. You can have districts work better than
Yes.
others. Uh, Obviously, my organization, we strongly support school choice, but
Yes.
we're not. That's not the only solution to our education problems. How would you change things, though?
So high level, what we're working on right now, and as we develop our policy documents as it comes into education, of course, we're going to be working with organizations across the state to help us improve the education that we're giving to our children. As you know, we're but somewhere between 30 and 35th in the nation for funding per
Mhm.
student, but we're getting the absolute dead last results. We've got to fix that. And quite frankly, there's a couple of different components that I believe fundamentally, along with school choice, that's a big one, along with school choice, but that's one component among many. I think where we need to see some really great investments, and we just did it up in Rio Rancho, and we've seen it working really well down in Hobbs, and we've seen it working in Carlsbad. And I think Artesia is embarking upon this, is uh, offering number one, CTE programs more expansively throughout the state. So that's on the high school side. When our high school students are out there, start investing more in this particular area, because long term, Paul, we're going to need trades. We're going to need the trades. We're going to need workforce, whether it's plumbing, welding, framing, electrical. All of these different trades that we're dealing in. We just recently broke ground on a new building that's going to be automotive technical as well. So training in EV mechanics, training in diesel mechanics, training in regular gasoline engines, and putting those kids to work right there in the dealerships that are in the general area. There's a lot of things that we can do on the high school side, but we need to get backing up. We need to work with each of the school districts to understand how we're going to go in and structure success. And when you look at the school districts in New Mexico, I've always said this, is that there's so many diverse differences from one school district to the next. Each one has very different needs. And I just see New Mexico continuing to take this one size fits all approach. And I also am watching their funding mechanism that really becomes punitive against the successful districts. And on that funding side, instead of rewarding the successful districts and saying, "Hey, look, if you're going to produce these superior results, Rio Rancho being one of them, we want to invest more in that. We want to follow that model. We want to see what you're doing to create the success." And make no mistake, statewide, you're looking at very different school districts. I point this one out. This is the one that I like to use. Is when you're taking an education policy from PED and you're applying it across the state, really, and then you've got two districts that are in pretty close proximity, Espanola and Los Alamos. Those are two very different districts. We need to be working on the ground locally with the individual districts to find out what they need, working with them to be successful, and helping fund those programs directly that are going to achieve those markable results. But once again, Paul, we've got to insist upon results. So as you go in and you start developing these district level programs, and you start really focusing in and saying, how are we going to work on these individual cases, they have to come with results. That's just it. And so if that means widening the guardrails so that you can develop the district more in tune with the community and character of the community and the culture of the community, then let's look at those factors. You saw the argument this past couple of years over the difference between a 4-day school week.
What's your take on that?
Well, quite frankly, if a school district feels that they can be more successful on a 4-day schedule, why not let them embark down that? Let's see how those results come out. And if they're delivering results that show that that is going to be a more effective teaching mechanism for them, then let them tailor to that particular model that they feel is best for them. Because I watched that argument back and forth, whether it should be 5 or 4, whether I mean, if you've got a district that's performing well under a 5-day school week, then let them do that. If they're performing better under a 4-day school week, let them do that. It doesn't always have to be, once again, one size fits all and everybody has to be the same. So that just doesn't work in New Mexico.
That's great. Definitely agree with you on the 4-day school week thing. I do need to pin you down, though, on school choice, since that's such a huge issue. Something like 17 states now have universal school choice. I realize that you are going to, best case scenario, you're governor of the state of New Mexico. Chances are you're going to be dealing with a hostile legislature.
Could be.
Chances are. But regardless, I think it's an important philosophical position to discuss and have a position on. What is your perspective on school choice?
If you're a parent and you don't feel like your children are getting the education that you're paying for as a taxpayer, you should be able to move your child into a school where they're getting the education that you want them to get. You need to feel like you should be able to take your child, get them that education so that they have the opportunity to do the best that they possibly can. And at that same point in time, uh, teeing them up for future success, so that when they get out of grade school and into middle school and into high school and then going off into college, that they are the best prepared to be successful in college, because we have those kids for 12 to 13 years on the local level, and then that's our one shot to get them prepared if they want to go off to college, or if they want to come up and be in a school that offers, or a district that offers CTE, like Rio Rancho or Hobbs or Carlsbad, looking at those particular programs. But then again, in Rio Rancho, we have some great schools like the Ask Academy and some other, there's some great charter schools out there and around the state that are doing some really great things. So I think fundamentally, it's a parental choice. It's a parental directive to say, I want to raise my child. I want them to get the best possible education that they can get. I want them to be successful. I want them to have a better life than I did. That's one of those lifelong goals, that when you're raising your kids, you're trying to give them the best opportunity to do better than you did. And so I think school choice is a fundamental component to that.
Wonderful. That's great. And unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap things up here pretty shortly. But the Rio Grande Foundation is broadly organized along three major policy issue areas: the economy, the education system,
Yes.
both of which we've discussed at some length here in this conversation, but also the Constitution. And I would be remiss if I did not mention and talk about the fact that the current governor, abused our public health laws and put herself up as more or less a dictator for over a year during the COVID-19 pandemic. You were mayor of Rio Rancho. What is your take on reforming the public emergency laws of the state of New Mexico to put the legislature, give them a seat at the table?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up, because I think you and I talked about this when we sat down and had lunch. Is the public health order, I think, there was a huge overreach when you use the public health order to say, for saying, okay, if you're a concealed carry or a gun owner in Bernalillo County, and you use the public health order to say you can't have your firearm anymore. I think that was an abuse of that public health order. That's just my personal opinion. And so going forward, I do think that the powers within the public health order need to be clarified, defined, and pulled back, and bring them more in line with the Constitution of the state of New Mexico. Whereas in the Constitution, this says when the governor calls a public emergency, that the legislature is to be called into session. And the reason the legislature is to be called into session, and they're not to be recessed for more than 2 days until that emergency is over. That is actual verbiage in the state's constitution, is that you have the legislature there to debate the necessity of the emergency. You have the legislature there to debate to provide funding if additional funding is needed to meet the needs of the emergency. The legislature is there also so that we don't have one person that is just in total control and in total charge. And so that being said, I think that we have elected legislators that should be involved in some of these higher level decisions, especially when it comes to a public health emergency where you're shutting down businesses, locking people in their homes, and mandating that they do this, that, or the other. For me, Paul, we need to propose some pullbacks on that. I'm not saying that the public health order doesn't have its place. I'm not saying that it doesn't have its the times when it needs to be used in a very responsible manner. But that being said, I think we see an overreach when you use it to say, okay, apply it to firearms in Bernalillo County. I thought that was big. I had problems on the front end with the pandemic as well, but that one I think sticks out, as a like a sore thumb, saying, okay, was that really an appropriate use of that particular authority? And I thought it was an overstep. I thought it was an overreach. And if you were a concealed carry person, if you had a concealed carry and you were in Bernalillo County at the time that that order got made, all that did was make every concealed carry owner a criminal in a flash right there. And so I think that some reform needs to be pulled into there. I don't think that was ever the intention of that public health order. I know that that was brought into play back in the Johnson administration when that was adopted. But I don't. But it was never applied the way we saw it applied once we came through the pandemic, and then with the firearm situation. So definite reform needs to be happen there, and that's something that I would be definitely supportive of. Once you get somebody into an office and they have those authorities, you very seldom see people pull those authorities back. I would want to see those authorities pulled back and brought into check and make sure that there's a lot more collaboration, a lot more individuals involved if we're going to go into a public health emergency like we've seen over the last several years. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult being a mayor during that time period as well. But definitely something that needs to be addressed.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Do you have a campaign website, or how should people get in touch with your campaign at this
Absolutely. You can go to gregghull.com, and that's GREGGHULL.com. And you can go there for information about the campaign. You can also email me at greg@gregghull.com, and that's GREGG@GREGGHULL.com. And we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your ideas as we continue down this path toward the governor's office. And we are excited for the future of New Mexico. We think New Mexico's got some really great, unrealized, untapped potential, and we want to talk to as many citizens as we can to make New Mexico the state that we all know that it can be.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor Hull, and thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.